Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. I've been an FBI agent for 12 years, worked dozens of high-profile cases, but nothing in my career prepared me for what happened in Millbrook, Louisiana. The assignment seemed routine at first: investigate reports of a cult potentially holding people against their will. The group had been protesting against the CDC facility that employed most of the town. Standard extremist behavior, or so we thought. I arrived around 7 a.m. on an unseasonably cool October morning. The sun was barely cresting over the tree line as I drove past the Welcome to Millbrook sign, its faded paint peeling at the edges. Something felt off immediately. The streets were deserted, no cars, no pedestrians, not even the usual morning traffic you'd expect in a town of this size. The local diner's neon open sign flickered weakly in the window, but inside, chairs were overturned, and half-eaten breakfast plates littered the tables. Steam still rose from a coffee pot on the burner. A newspaper on the counter was dated today, its pages scattered as if dropped mid-read. The scene reminded me of those old Twilight Zone episodes where everyone mysteriously vanishes, leaving their lives frozen in mid-moment. I made my way to the police station, my footsteps echoing off empty storefronts. Empty patrol cars sat in their spots, doors ajar, radios crackling with static. Inside, papers were scattered across desks, computer screens still glowing with half-written reports. A coffee cup had spilled across a keyboard, the liquid not yet dry. The holding cells were empty. The dispatch desk was abandoned, phones ringing unanswered. A bulletin board displayed a map of the town with red pins marking locations, presumably related to the cult investigation. I photographed it with my phone, noting several pins clustered around the CDC facility on the outskirts of town. Walking the main street, I checked each business methodically. The pharmacy's automatic doors slid open at my approach, revealing toppled shelves and ransacked aisles. The security camera footage showed a crowd rushing the store at 6:15 a.m., grabbing medical supplies in a panic before fleeing. Something had spooked the entire town, and recently, at the local clinic, I found more signs of chaos. Patient files were strewn across the floor, and several beds showed signs of struggle, torn sheets, overturned equipment. In one room, an IV stand lay across a bed, the bag still slowly dripping onto the floor. A doctor's coat hung on a hook, the pocket holding a handwritten note. CDC, Code 7, Evacuation Protocol. My phone had no signal. The radio in my car picked up nothing but static across all frequencies. I tried the landline at the post office. Dead. Even the town's emergency siren system stood silent, though the control panel showed it had been activated just hours ago. In the town square, a digital bank sign alternated between displaying the time and temperature. 8:47 a.m. Below it, a hastily written message on the community bulletin board caught my eye. Emergency meeting, CDC facility, 6 a.m. Another note beside it in different handwriting: stay away from the infected. The elementary school parking lot was full of cars, but the building was empty. In one classroom, tiny chairs were scattered around half-finished art projects. A teacher's coffee mug sat beside a lesson plan for the day, the pages fluttering in the breeze from an open window. A child's backpack lay in the hallway, its contents spilled across the floor. At the town hall, I found more evidence of the morning's panic. The mayor's office door hung open, revealing a desk covered in emergency protocols and CDC documents. One paper bore a red confidential stamp and detailed quarantine procedures. The date at the top was yesterday's. The air felt thick, almost electric, like the moments before a severe storm. But the sky remained clear, mockingly bright against the emptiness below. As I walked the streets, I noticed other signs of hasty departure. Cars stopped at odd angles. Personal belongings dropped in the middle of sidewalks. Doors left wide open. I checked my watch. 9:15 a.m. In just 3 hours of investigation, I'd found a town of 3,000 people completely abandoned. No bodies, no blood, no signs of violence. Just an overwhelming sense that everyone had fled from something in terror. The cult's headquarters was visible now. A converted warehouse on the edge of town, its walls covered in bizarre symbols painted in red. But before I could head there, movement caught my eye in a minivan parked near the hardware store. Someone was still here. As I approached the vehicle, I could see a figure huddled in the driver's seat. A woman, probably in her 40s, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. Her eyes were wide, staring straight ahead at nothing. When I tapped on the window, she didn't even flinch. The door was unlocked. As I opened it, the sound finally seemed to reach her. She turned to me slowly, her face pale and drawn. "Are you one of them?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Have you seen what they become?" "Are you with the CDC?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. Her name was Maxine Doyle, a nurse at the local clinic. I showed her my FBI credentials, which seemed to offer little comfort. Her hands remained locked on the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. "They said everything was under control," she whispered, gaze fixed straight ahead. "The CDC facility. They were doing tests, blood work, tissue samples. Then people started disappearing." Her words came faster now, tumbling out like she couldn't hold them back. "Last night at the clinic, something was wrong. The patients, they weren't themselves. Dr. Reynolds called the CDC, but no one came. I convinced her to help me investigate the town. Her medical background could prove invaluable." As we walked toward the clinic, Maxine explained more about the cult's recent activities. They'd been protesting the CDC's presence for months, claiming dangerous experiments were being conducted. Their membership had grown significantly after several townspeople vanished without trace. The clinic's fluorescent lights flickered overhead as we entered. Papers littered the floor, and medical equipment lay scattered across counters. In the examination rooms, we found signs of struggle. Torn privacy curtains, overturned instrument trays, blood droplets on the floor. "Dr. Reynolds' office," Maxine said, leading me down a corridor. He was documenting everything. The office door hung open, its window shattered. Inside, filing cabinets had been ransacked, their contents strewn about. On the desk, a laptop still hummed. Maxine typed in a password, and we found a series of video logs. The most recent entry showed Dr. Reynolds, his face haggard with exhaustion. "Patient 0 showed symptoms unlike anything in medical literature," he reported. "Extreme aggression, elevated body temperature, complete non-response to sedation. The CDC claims no knowledge, but their facility's waste containers match the ones we found at the cult's gathering site. Something's being covered up, and I'm going to expose..." The video cut off abruptly. We found more disturbing details in his patient files. Multiple cases of severe fever and aggressive behavior had been reported in the past week. All were somehow connected to the cult or the CDC facility. Blood test results showed bizarre anomalies that even Maxine couldn't explain. The hospital was our next stop. The emergency room looked like a war zone. Beds overturned, medical supplies scattered everywhere. The admission records told a grim story. Dozens of patients brought in last night with similar symptoms. High fever, disorientation, violence. "The quarantine ward," Maxine said suddenly. "They converted the East Wing yesterday, said it was just a precaution. The ward's doors were chained shut, with warning signs hastily taped up. Through the small windows, we could see more chaos, broken restraints hanging from beds, walls splashed with dark stains. A clipboard nearby held patient charts describing unprecedented cellular degradation and extreme physiological changes. In the hospital security office, we found more footage. The cameras had captured last night's chaos as it unfolded. Medical staff rushing through corridors, patients being forcefully restrained. Then around 3 a.m., the power flickered and most feeds went dark. The pharmacy's security tapes showed a different angle of the morning's events. People rushed in at dawn, grabbing antibiotics, painkillers, anything they could carry. The timestamp matched when the emergency meeting was called at the CDC facility. We moved on to the town hall, where Mayor Lawrence's office held more pieces of the puzzle. Stacks of correspondence with the CDC detailed a growing conflict. The facility had been expanding its operations, requesting more land, more resources. The cult's protests had become increasingly aggressive. One letter caught my attention. The mayor threatening to contact federal authorities about ethical violations at the facility. The CDC's response was heavily redacted, but words like national security and containment protocols were visible. The police station's evidence room yielded another breakthrough. They'd been investigating the cult for months, photographing members and tracking their movements. One photo showed cultists unloading familiar-looking medical containers from a CDC truck late at night. "Those containers," Maxine pointed, her hand shaking. "They're supposed to be incinerated at the facility. What were they doing with them?" In the dispatch office, we found recordings of last night's emergency calls, descriptions of violent attacks, people acting rabid or possessed. The final call came from Dr. Reynolds. "They're not responding to anything. It's spreading too fast. The cult, they took something from the facility. They didn't understand what they were dealing with." The school was particularly eerie. In the nurse's office, we found records of students becoming suddenly ill over the past week. All lived near the cult's headquarters. A map on the wall showed their addresses clustered around that area of town. The local newspaper's office provided more context. Reporters had been investigating links between missing persons cases and cult activity. Their research board connected multiple disappearances to both the cult and the CDC facility. Photos showed cult members in medical scrubs, suggesting they had infiltrated the facility's staff. As afternoon approached, we found ourselves reviewing evidence at the police station. The pattern was clear. The cult had stolen something from the CDC, something dangerous. Their headquarters was our next logical stop. "There's more," Maxine said, spreading out medical records. "Look at the blood work from recent patients. These cell mutations. I've never seen anything like it. It's like their bodies were transforming at a cellular level." The converted warehouse loomed before us, its walls covered in bizarre symbols painted in red. The parking lot held a single black van, its rear doors slightly open. As we approached, a sickly, sweet odor became noticeable, like decay, but somehow worse. My years working homicide had acquainted me with death's scent, but this was different. I drew my weapon, every instinct screaming danger. The warehouse door creaked open at my touch, the sound echoing through the cavernous space beyond. Emergency lights cast a sickly green glow across rows of metal tables. Medical equipment was scattered everywhere, along with papers covered in cryptic diagrams. In the center stood some kind of altar, surrounded by candles that had burned to stubs. Dark stains marked the floor around it. The air grew thicker as we moved deeper into the building, the smell becoming almost unbearable. "These are CDC protocols," Maxine whispered, examining papers on a nearby desk. "But they're altered, like they were trying to modify something, testing it on people." A noise from behind made us spin around. Nothing moved in the green-tinged shadows, but something was different. A soft, wet sound reached our ears, like labored breathing, but distorted and wrong. The sound came again, closer. My flashlight beam caught movement behind a fallen cabinet. A hand emerged, gray, bloated, the fingers curled like claws. Then we saw its face, and everything we thought we knew about reality changed forever. The face that emerged from behind the cabinet belonged to someone who should have been dead. The skin had a grayish pallor, pulled tight across distorted features. Blood and other fluids caked its mouth and chin. The eyes were clouded over, almost completely white, yet somehow still tracking movement with primitive hunger. "Dr. Reynolds," Maxine breathed, her voice barely a whisper. What remained of the doctor lurched forward with raw aggression. Its jaw snapped open and closed with mechanical repetition, teeth clicking together. The sound triggered something primal in my brain. Run, hide, survive. I raised my weapon, but Maxine grabbed my arm. "The noise will attract more," she hissed. We backed away slowly, watching as the thing that used to be Dr. Reynolds emerged fully into view. Its lab coat was shredded and stained with dark patches, one arm bent at an impossible angle, yet it still moved with frightening speed. A crash from deeper in the warehouse made us both jump. More sounds followed, scraping, shuffling, the wet click of teeth. We weren't alone. "The office," Maxine whispered, pointing to a door marked "Private" across the room. "We need to find what they were doing here." The infected doctor's head turned toward her voice. Its mouth opened wider than humanly possible, revealing rows of bloodied teeth. Without warning, it charged, not with the stumbling gait of movie zombies, but with raw, animalistic speed. I shoved Maxine toward the office as the creature lunged. Its fingers, now more like talons, raked across my jacket. The fabric tore but didn't break skin. I slammed my elbow into its face, feeling bone crack. It didn't even register the impact. We made it to the office, slamming the door shut just as more infected appeared from the shadows. Through the door's window, I counted at least 6, former cult members, judging by the tattered robes some still wore. They slammed against the door with mindless fury, driven purely by instinct to reach us. "Help me with this," I urged, pushing a metal filing cabinet against the door. Maxine added her weight, and together we created a barrier. The infected threw themselves against it repeatedly, their combined force making the cabinet shake. "Look for anything about what they were doing," I said, keeping my weight against our makeshift barricade. "Notes, files, anything." Maxine rifled through papers on the desk, her hands shaking but determined. "Here, lab reports, they were—" "Oh God." She went pale, steadying herself against the desk. "They were trying to modify something they stole from the CDC. Some kind of experimental treatment. It turned people violent, aggressive." The banging intensified. A gray hand punched through the window, glass shattering. I slammed it back with the butt of my gun, but more followed. "They were dying," Maxine continued, reading frantically. "The cult members they tested it on. But then they got back up, changed. They thought they could control it, use it to prove the CDC was evil. But it spread too fast." The filing cabinet scraped against the floor as the infected pushed harder. One of them had wedged its face through the broken window, snapping its teeth inches from my shoulder. The smell of rot and copper filled the air. "There's a back door," I noticed, spotting another exit behind the desk. "We need to move. Now." Maxine grabbed the most relevant files and stuffed them in her jacket. The filing cabinet groaned as the door began to splinter. We'd run out of time. I drew my gun, knowing the noise would draw more, but seeing no choice. The infected doctor's face appeared in the window, its milky eyes reflecting the dim light. I fired twice, the shots deafening in the small office. The thing's head snapped back, dark fluid spraying the wall. It dropped, but others immediately pressed forward, driven by pure instinct. We rushed to the back door as the barricade finally gave way. The infected poured in, moving with singular purpose. They operated on basic impulses: see prey, chase prey, feed. The door opened into a narrow corridor lined with more medical equipment. Plastic sheets hung from the ceiling, creating a maze-like path. Behind us, the infected followed blindly, crashing through obstacles in their relentless pursuit. "They don't even try to avoid anything," Maxine realized, her voice tight with fear. We emerged into another large room and froze. Medical beds filled the space, each equipped with restraints. Dark stains covered the mattresses. Tables held surgical tools and vials of cloudy liquid. On the walls, photos documented the cult's victims as they transformed, their bodies twisted by whatever the CDC had created. But worse than the room's contents were its occupants. At least a dozen infected blocked our path, including several in CDC hazmat suits. They moved toward us with predatory speed, driven by pure animal instinct. "The vents," Maxine whispered, pointing up. A large air duct hung from the ceiling, its panel loose. I fired at the nearest infected, the bullet taking it in the shoulder. It staggered but kept coming. These things felt no pain. Unless... I remembered Dr. Reynolds, how he'd dropped when I hit him in the head. The brain, I realized. It has to be the brain. My next shot caught a former cult member in the forehead. It collapsed instantly, dark fluid pooling beneath its skull. The others kept coming, undeterred by their fallen companion. "Boost me up," Maxine said, moving beneath the vent. "I'm smaller, I can pull you after." I holstered my gun and linked my hands into a stirrup. Maxine stepped up, grabbing the vent's edge. The infected surged forward as she pulled herself inside. One of them, wearing the shredded remains of a CDC uniform, reached me first. Its teeth snapped inches from my throat as we grappled. The thing's strength was incredible, its fingers digging into my arms like steel clamps. Maxine's hands appeared from above. I drove my knee into the infected's chest, buying enough space to jump. My fingers closed around her wrists as more creatures grabbed at my legs. A sharp pain exploded in my calf. One of them had its teeth in my leg, but through my boot. The thick leather held, keeping its bite from breaking skin. Maxine pulled harder, and with a final surge of desperate strength, I kicked free. We crawled through the vent as the infected swarmed below, their inhuman cries echoing through the metal shaft. The sounds followed us, growing louder. "There's movement in the vents," Maxine gasped. Ahead, light filtered through another panel. We had no idea what waited on the other side, but the scraping sounds behind us grew closer. The choice was made for us. I kicked out the panel and we dropped into hell. We crashed through the ceiling panel into what appeared to be an incinerator room. The fall knocked the wind out of me, but the scattered cardboard boxes broke our landing. As I caught my breath, the smell hit me. Charred flesh and chemicals, an acrid combination that burned my throat. The room was dominated by a large industrial incinerator, its metal surface stained with dark streaks. Piles of half-burned documents littered the floor, mixed with shattered vials and melted medical equipment. The cult had tried destroying evidence, but they'd run out of time. Maxine scrambled to her feet, grabbing papers that had escaped the flames. "Patient logs," she said, scanning them quickly. They were documenting the effects, testing different exposure methods. A rhythmic banging echoed through the vents above. The infected were still coming. I moved to the room's only door, pressing my ear against it. No sounds from the other side. Not yet. "These are CDC termination orders," Maxine called, holding up a singed document. They were shutting everything down. The experimental treatment was too dangerous, too unstable. That meeting this morning was supposed to announce the facility's closure. The banging grew louder. A section of vent creaked ominously. "We need to move," I urged, but Maxine was transfixed by another document. "They were keeping people in cells," she whispered. "The cult stole samples, thought they could prove it was divine healing. They didn't understand what they were taking." A crash behind us. The vent had given way. 2 infected dropped into the room, their milky eyes registering our presence. I raised my gun, remembering to aim for the head, but before I could fire, more crashed through. We bolted through the door into a wider storage area. Rows of metal shelving created narrow aisles, many still holding boxes of medical supplies. At the far end, cell doors lined the wall. Most hung open, their interiors dark. The infected poured through the door behind us. I fired twice, dropping the leaders, but more kept coming. We weaved through the shelves, knocking boxes down behind us. They plowed through everything, following their base impulses. "There!" Maxine pointed to a stairwell marked "Exit." But as we ran toward it, movement caught my eye. More infected emerging from the cells. Former test subjects, their bodies bearing evidence of crude experiments. Surgical scars crossed their gray flesh, some still wearing hospital gowns stained with fluid. We were trapped between 2 groups, running out of options. The incinerator room's door stood open behind us, and an idea struck. "The gas lines," I said, gesturing to the pipes running along the ceiling. "If we rupture them..." Maxine understood immediately. She grabbed a metal pole from a fallen shelf rack while I reloaded my weapon. The infected closed in from both sides, their movements quickening as they detected prey. I fired at the gas pipes while Maxine swung the pole at the incinerator's control panel. Sparks flew as metal struck metal. The pipes began to hiss. The nearest infected lunged for Maxine. I caught it with a headshot, but another grabbed my arm. Its teeth snapped inches from my face as we grappled. The thing's raw strength caught me off guard. Maxine smashed the control panel again. Electricity arced as more gas filled the air. We fought our way toward the exit, the air growing thick with fumes. I emptied my magazine into the crowd blocking our path. Bodies fell, but the press of infected barely thinned. Maxine swung her pole like a baseball bat, keeping them back just enough for us to move. We reached the stairwell door just as the first spark caught. The gas ignited with a whoosh, blue flames racing along the ceiling. The infected continued forward, oblivious to the flames consuming them. We slammed the door shut behind us and ran up the stairs. The explosion caught us halfway up, the force throwing us against the wall. Heat and pressure rolled through the stairwell as the fire found more fuel. Secondary explosions followed, probably oxygen tanks or other medical supplies. The building's ancient structure groaned. We emerged into the warehouse's main floor as chunks of ceiling began to fall. Flames spread quickly through the old building. The remaining infected still followed, even as fire consumed them, their primal need to feed overwhelming even their own destruction. We burst out of the building into late afternoon sunlight. Behind us, the warehouse was fully engulfed. Black smoke poured from broken windows as more explosions rocked the structure. But our relief was short-lived. Movement in the streets caught my attention, more infected, drawn by the noise. And worse, I saw others emerging from the burning warehouse, their clothes smoldering but still advancing. "They're going to spread through the town," Maxine realized, her voice tight with fear. "We have to stop this." I checked my ammunition, 3 rounds left. The empty street stretched before us, silent except for the crackling flames behind us. "The CDC facility," I said. "Whatever this is, it started there. We need to find out what we're really dealing with." Maxine nodded grimly. "And how to stop it." The warehouse's roof gave way with a deafening roar, sending a column of sparks into the darkening sky. The facility stood abandoned at the edge of town, holding the answers we desperately needed. But reaching it meant crossing 3 miles of infected territory. The infection would spread beyond this town if we didn't find answers, and we were running out of time. We were half a mile from the CDC facility when we found him. Dr. Marcus Klein stumbled out from behind an abandoned car, his lab coat torn and splattered with blood. His eyes were wild with terror, hands clutching a hard drive against his chest like a lifeline. "Don't go there," he rasped, backing away until he recognized Maxine's hospital ID badge. "Your medical staff? Listen, everything's gone, everyone's gone." I showed him my FBI credentials, which seemed to calm him slightly. "What happened in there?" I asked. Klein slumped against the car, trembling. "The morning meeting. We were announcing the facility's shutdown, the experiments, they were too dangerous. We had to terminate everything." He paused, swallowing hard. Then Anderson started convulsing. We thought it was a heart attack, tried to help him. But when we reached him, he just... The doctor's voice cracked. Maxine offered him water from her bag, which he gulped desperately. "He attacked Dr. Rivers first," Klein continued. "Tore right into her throat. Others tried to help, but Anderson was impossibly strong. Then Rivers got up and she started attacking too. The whole room descended into chaos." "The containment protocols?" I prompted. Klein laughed bitterly. "Oh, they worked perfectly. Locked down the whole facility. Trapped everyone inside with those things. Hundreds of staff, security teams, everyone who came for the meeting. The infection spread through the building like wildfire." A distant crash made us all jump. Klein's eyes darted frantically toward the facility. "I only got out because I had override access to the security systems. But the containment barriers are failing. They're breaking through the fences. Soon they'll all be loose." "The cult," Maxine said. "They stole samples from you." Klein nodded grimly. "They thought it was miraculous healing. Idiots. We were trying to develop rapid tissue regeneration, but the compound had devastating neurological effects. That's why we were shutting it down. The samples they stole were scheduled for incineration." Another crash, closer this time. Through the trees, we could see movement at the facility's perimeter, figures pressed against the chain-link fences, making them bow outward. "We need to call in an airstrike," Klein insisted. his voice rising. "Level the whole area. It's the only way to contain this. If they reach other population centers..." The fence gave way with a metallic shriek. Dozens of infected poured through the gap, their pale bodies moving with terrible speed. "The gas station on Route 16, Klein said as we ran. "It has emergency equipment. We can call for help." We piled into my car, the infected closing the distance behind us. Through the rear window, I watched the facility's remaining fences collapse. The horde grew larger, spreading outward like a flood. The station stood empty when we arrived, its windows dark. The interior was a mess of overturned shelves and scattered merchandise, evidence of panicked looting. Klein stumbled toward the counter, his composure finally breaking. "There should be an emergency radio," he muttered, searching frantically. All remote stations were equipped after the hurricane season last year. We found the radio set up in the back office. Maxine powered it up while I kept watch at the window. Static filled the room as she cycled through frequencies. Then a voice cut through the white noise. "Multiple casualties reported in Baton Rouge. Military blockades established on major highways. All civilians instructed to remain indoors." Another frequency. "Lafayette General Hospital has been overrun. Emergency services are no longer responding. Please avoid downtown areas." Alexandria implementing martial law. Centers for Disease Control issuing nationwide alert. All suspected cases should be reported immediately. Klein sank into a chair, his face ashen. "It's everywhere. Other samples must have been stolen, distributed to other cult chapters. We never knew how far their network reached." A burst of static. Then, "Warning, New Orleans French Quarter quarantine failing. Military authorized to use lethal force. Residents advised to evacuate immediately." Through the station's windows, we could see the orange glow on the horizon growing brighter. Black smoke stained the darkening sky above the next town. Distant screams carried on the wind, mixed with sounds that shouldn't come from human throats. Maxine tried other frequencies, but found only static or automated emergency broadcasts. The few live voices we heard painted a picture of spreading chaos. Hospitals overwhelmed, evacuation routes jammed, civil services collapsing. "The containment protocols," Klein whispered. "They were designed for a single facility breach. We never planned for multiple simultaneous outbreaks. The infection's growth rate, the speed of transmission." His scientific detachment crumbled. "Oh God, what have we done?" A loud thud from the front of the station made us all freeze. Through the window, a figure staggered into view. Its head snapped toward us, milky eyes reflecting the dim light. More shapes emerged from the darkness behind it. "We need to move," I said, checking my gun one last time. 3 rounds. "Find somewhere defensible, try to contact authorities. There are military bunkers," Klein offered. "Hardened facilities designed for exactly this scenario. If we can reach one, warn them." Another crash. Closer this time. The infected were probing the building's weak points, drawn by our movement or voices. We gathered what supplies we could find: water, food, a few tools that could serve as weapons. As we slipped out the back door, I caught one last transmission through the radio. Infection spreading faster than projected. Government officials being evacuated to secure locations. God help us all. We moved through the darkness, keeping to the shadows, watching the glow of distant fires paint the clouds above. The world we knew was ending, city by city, hour by hour. And in the darkness around us, the infected moved, multiplied, spread. This was just the first night. And somewhere in the growing chaos, people needed to know what was coming. They needed to understand what they were facing before it was too late. Behind us, the radio crackled one final time before dying completely, leaving us alone with the sounds of a civilization crumbling into nightmare.